Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lady Scientist Podcast. I'm your host, Jocelyn Pearl, and today we have an interview with Kathy Lee-Sepsick, the CEO and founder of a company called Femysys that's in the women's health and reproductive space. I can't wait to share her insights with all of you. Before we jump in, I want to thank our sponsor, Kendall Investor Relations. And if you've been enjoying our content, please make sure to click subscribe and share this show with some new listeners. Thank you so much for supporting Lady Scientist Podcast. Hello, everyone. Today it is my pleasure to introduce Kathy Lee-Sepsick. She's the CEO and founder of a company called Femysys that's been focused on fertility innovations and options for fertility and women's healthcare. And for those who've been listening to the podcast for a long time, you know, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. I think it's been an understudied space. And I love that Kathy has been working in this area. She founded Femasys 18 years ago, I believe. And today we're going to dive into her career journey to founding this company, how things have evolved over the years, all the great innovations that they've provided to this space. And I'm really excited to share her insights with all of you. So Kathy, thank you so much for being on Lady Scientist Podcast.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
Let's start out with your background. So can you give us a brief overview of your career?
Yep. So I have a degree in biochemistry, and then I went straight through and got my MBA. And I was fortunate. I'm in Atlanta now, but at the time I grew up in New York and New Jersey, and I had an opportunity to do some internships at pharmaceutical companies and landed my first job out of grad school at a med tech firm. And I loved it from day one. And so all of my background's been in med tech, and I was able to work for larger companies, smaller companies prior to founding my own company, but strictly med tech, different areas within med tech, not women's health, actually, cardiovascular, orthopedics, to name a few. But that's been my journey to get to Femasys, a blend of startups and some larger companies as well.
And as far as your decisions for your education, so you started out in science with biochemistry as an undergraduate, and then you went on to get your MBA. What played into that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had an interest in the sciences, so it was a very natural decision for me to pursue that type of undergraduate degree. I will say I was a pre-med student, so it's not surprising with the biochem degree. But I decided kind of early on that I really felt I wanted to combine the business side of it with science, and I wanted to do it early because I wanted to go straight into industry. So I didn't wait to get my MBA. I didn't have the job experience except for internships. And that was just a personal decision I made to go straight through and then join the workforce. So it really was that part of it. It was the interest in industry that drove me to the MBA.
Love it. And did you feel like getting your MBA set you up well for entering into industry once you were finished with that degree?
For me, it did. I actually pursued a role in product management, and I was able to be very technical, and the science background absolutely was essential. But then there was such a business component to it, how to commercialize the entire development process, working with regulatory, clinical, all of the elements that you get to have exposure to in a product management role. And I got to look at various different areas within the body. So that was incredibly interesting to me. And I was able to go out in the field. So because I had interned so much at hospitals, it was such second nature to me. I had that opportunity. It was just great. I just loved everything about it.
So you were building this niche for yourself early on in your career from a business and med tech, medical. What's the full definition of med tech?
Medical technology.
Medical technology.
Yeah. And I built it exactly how I wanted to see my career evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And I I enjoyed so much of it that I just kind of took on more elements of it. But being technical and being in business is really crucial working in this type of environment, because the technical piece allows you to have the conversations with physicians and be able to bridge that for others that may be less technical in that way, but more business oriented. And then the business piece is absolutely essential when you're thinking about combining how do you advance technology from a business perspective. So it really is, I think, essential in many roles within med tech, biotech, pharma, even when we look at advancing products all the way through the cycle.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, how crucial marrying the technical expertise, the domain expertise with the business knowledge can be for this space. So what did the next few years look like for you post-degree? What were the types of roles you were seeking out, and how did that evolve leading up to you founding Femysys?
So I started in a product management role, as I mentioned, and I actually worked at the US subsidiary of a very large Japanese firm. So I was able to get some exposure internationally. I'm actually the first generation born here. My dad's Korean, my mom's Colombian, so it's an unusual mix, but so I'm very comfortable with international aspects, but that's very different from a business perspective. So that was really exciting with that particular role. And one of our main business partners was Boston Scientific at the time. They were, prior to going public, they were a smaller organization. And I was able to look at product usage throughout the body, neurovascular, cardiovascular, radiology. So all of that kind of gave me a wide breadth. And then I decided to leave Terumo and join a startup. And that's when I got exposure to a short stint in women's health, but mostly orthopedics. And it was my passion to envision myself being in the role that I am in right now. So I very much prepared myself through these multiple startups to be able to start my own company. I wanted to be really prepared. So I'm kind of a planner by heart, so you can kind of see, planned out my career, planned out everything really. And so I didn't stumble on anything. It was very purposeful. And I, wanted to make sure I gave myself the best chance at success. And certainly anyone that came along for the ride, became part of the team, whether it was an investor or an employee, that I was well positioned to carry it through the various different stages. So the various different startups I worked in, product management to business development to basically running the company at the startup before Femasys. I was able to sit in on board meetings, work with investors, bring on that fundraising piece that's so critically important for a startup. So I was able to do that kind of all prior to starting Femasys.
It sounds like you put so much thought into both training yourself as a leader and a founder, but also making those crucial connections that you would need to start your own thing. So what were the pieces that came into place that made you feel like you were ready to start Femysys? And I especially both on the kind of personal psychological side, but also on the idea or thesis side of what Femysys was going to focus on.
So at the time in which I decided to take the leap, I've been married to my husband. We've been together since I was 18 years old. So long time. And we have 2 girls. And at the time they were 7 and 4. And I was looking at options that we as women have for basic healthcare needs. And I'm the inventor on all the technology at Femasys. So it's a bit unusual in that regard. And so I just felt like we were being underserved when the time comes when you want to control the number of children that you have. And those options were just so limited. And I mean, tubal ligation surgery has been around 100 years. That's it. So I thought my idea was worthy. And I felt strongly that it would change women's healthcare potentially for women around the world. And I set such a lofty goal. It is a more challenging product to bring through the FDA and regulatory process. It's the most stringent medical device classified as a class 3. And so I looked at that invention and said, I think I have something, and started working on the IP and building the team around that and starting to advance R&D. We worked out of my home at first. So this is the story, a true startup story. My kids would be banished to different parts of the house while employees would be coming all day, all night. Everybody had keys to my home, and we just opened ourselves up to all the possibilities this could be. And we took a very big decision of my husband left his job to stay home to help with the kids because we wanted to make sure I could stay really focused. So it was an all in kind of scenario, and that was 18 years ago. But I was really prepared from a business standpoint that I understood all the elements that needed to come into place to secure financing, to advance the company. I understood the development cycle. I had been involved in a class 3 clinical trial previously, which isn't very common. It was in cardiovascular, but so I had that experience. So I knew what it was going to take. And so I built around that and jumped. So.
Wow. And as far as the fundraising component, what did that look like for Femysys in the early days?
So typical friends and family round in the beginning. And I didn't really anticipate that it would have evolved this way, but it turns out family offices and high net worth individual investors became absolutely crucial to Femysys. Up until I took the company public June of 2021. That was the first time we actually brought on any institutional investors. So in one of my later rounds, we brought on Medtronic as a strategic investor. So it was very validating. But up until that point, that's who we relied on for our funding. And there's reasons for that. But that just evolved in our overall strategy. So from day one, that was a very important component, and then continued to be an important funding source for us.
Interesting. Definitely a different model than we're seeing a lot of, in the modern day founder-led biotech space right now with, a major reliance on VC funding.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into the IP a little bit, because I find this so interesting. So you were the inventor of the original technology. And did you say that you're the inventor on all of the technology that Femysys has now developed, or?
Yeah, I am. And so it's been very purposeful to make sure everything's synergistic. We have a platform. So some of the technologies advance off the same platform. Others are more unique and are companion products. But yes, I am the lead inventor on all of it. So we haven't licensed anything. We certainly could be in a position to do so down the line. So every product that we're working on has a place. There's a reason. And then we pursue it and bring it forward in the development cycle. But it started with our permanent birth control product initially.
I see. Can you walk us through a little bit as far as what that technology serves?
Sure. So we have a unique delivery modality. We're able to deliver into the uterine cavity, specifically to a woman's fallopian tubes, in a way that no one thought to do. And I've taken that technology and said, what can we do with it? In one situation for permanent birth control, we've also had to develop what we're using, which is a tissue adhesive based product as a biopolymer. And we need to combine those two things to affect the ultimate endpoint, which is eliminating the risk of pregnancy. For FemBlock, I set the goal that I did not want to leave anything behind in the patient. I want it to be as natural as possible, so no implant whatsoever. So our biopolymer is indwelling a very short period of time, about 3 months, and then it's gone. What we leave behind for the patient is her own scar tissue. And that is very different than any approaches that have come about for this particular issue. And so not only did we need the delivery mechanism, we needed that biopolymer, and they both ran very different development cycles. As far as the delivery part, we then took that ability to isolate and deliver to the tubes in a way where you don't need anesthesia, the doctor doesn't need any special skill sets. It's minimally invasive. It comes through the vagina into the uterine cavity without leaving anything behind, very much like an IUD placement. And in other applications, we are pursuing a product called Femasys, which allows us to place sperm directly into the tube where conception occurs. So in this category, as is similar to Femblock's category, decades, there's been no innovation. Same technologies around for a very, very, very long time. So we're looking to improve options, expand options, replace antiquated technology that exists. We can also leverage that same delivery platform to deliver medication to the tube. Today, we know ovarian cancer, it used to be suspected, and now there's really phenomenal literature that supports this, starts in the fallopian tube. So we have the ability to isolate the tube and not have to come in laparoscopically to access the tube. And so those are some additional applications for the delivery mechanism. We are also the developers of a product called Fembu. Fembu is on the market. I call it a companion diagnostic because in order to help a woman get pregnant with our therapeutic option called Femasys and put the sperm in her tube has to be open. And so one of the baseline diagnostic exams to look at a person's fallopian tubes up until Fembu was sending her to radiology, exposing her to radiation, utilizing radiopaque dye. It's an expensive exam. She's not with her GYN. And we changed that with our Fembu product. We utilize standard existing ultrasound. The GYN can now look at all infertility factors in one visit. Before, they fell just shy, just could not look at the tubes, and our product allows for that. And so it's a very, very exciting product line. We're commercializing it directly. We don't have a sales force. So it's word of mouth. We're selling quite a bunch of these, but one day that will change when we're able to support it commercially and bring it forward with our therapeutic option. And the two go hand in hand. We utilize that same similar technology where we're basically creating bubbles, natural saline and air contrast to look at the tubes. We are utilizing that for our Femblock option as well. So when women go through this technology, we can check her tubes, make sure the scarring occurred before she relies on it long term. So we're leveraging that companion diagnostic for a multitude of purposes.
It's so exciting to learn about this space because I guess for myself as naive to medical technology and this space, it just seems like there have been such limited options for women, and you're really advancing what clinicians can do to support women in their fertility journey. So it's really exciting. And I wanted to ask, on your website it says that Femysis has over 100 patents. So can you clarify, you're the inventor of all of that technology?
Yes, I am. But the patents, there are base patents, and then we file them in multiple countries. So,
I see.
but yeah, we have a very robust IP portfolio with that many patents. We have design patents, we have method patents, we have extension patents, to continue our patent life. We have a few other products that we have some diagnostic products for detection of cervical cancer. It falls into the same mantra of replacing many decades old technology. So we're looking to advance that as well. But so there's a body of IP for that. And it's all focused in the office for the OB-GYNs. I mean, that was really the deliberate mission. We wanted to engage the doctor in the office because GYNs practice in hospitals, outpatient surgery centers, office, and they don't have many technologies in the office where they can bring that to their patients in a safe and convenient way. So that's our entire focus. We don't focus on any of the other call points, and very few companies, if any, if we want to say, are really doing that. So we see that as a huge opportunity for many reasons.
And so what is your process like for this bolus of inventions? Do you speak with the doctors about what's missing and that informs your design process? And And then how does that connect with the business as a whole and yourself as a leader and your time? Like, is it, how much of your time is spent on this process?
I mean, for FemBlock, to be honest, that came right from pure personal desire and understanding the issues that women face when you're trying to control I'm a huge advocate of not being on hormones when you hit a certain age. I mean, there's box warnings on all of those products. I mean, when you hit over the age of 35, which clearly I am at the moment by 20 years. But it's not good for us to stay on hormones. And that's really the predominant option available to women. And when you're at that stage of your reproductive life, what choices do you have? I was aware the increased risk of blood clotting. We now know there's an increased risk of breast cancer. So hormones serve a role in the early years. They're not ideal in the later years. And when you look at the breadth of options, if you don't want to, just kind of by chance continue to have children, and you want to really control that part of it, you're left with little to no options. And so that invention did not come from a validation from physicians, because I already know what they have. They have one thing to offer their patients, and it's surgery. So it really was out of pure frustration, personal frustration. I also have 2 girls. One day they're going to be here too. And so are their girlfriends and everyone else that we know that are extensions to who we are and to who we know. And I also look globally when we think about and have seen and witnessed women that have undergone surgical approaches in non-sterile environments, what that can look like. So it's an opportunity to really kind of change the landscape for women around the world with a product like this. And then as a result of it came the birth of these other products. Again, similar delivery mechanism. How do I fix this confirmatory test? That was really what brought me to FemView. It was the stress around, I don't feel good about sending her to radiology. I come forward with what I think is an ideal solution, and that I hope others think is ideal, but then I send her to radiology for an expensive test that we know women won't go for. And so, that kind of is the evolution of how some of these products have come to be. How do we fix the core product that we're working on? How do we fix all of it? And then, how do we make the GYN very engaged in the office? How do we bring more technologies to that call point and solve other issues? And that's been the driving force.
Just to give us a sense, what is the team like at Femasys? And I know on your website, you have it front and center that this company is woman-led, obviously. Can you talk about what it has looked like over the years for you to build out this team and kind of what the makeup is today?
So, I mean, women-led meaning me. We have a very blended team. It's very diverse, men, women, all sorts of ethnicities, and women of various different ages, men of various different ages. It's important to have multiple perspectives. I think that's important, even running a women's health company. And I see men running women's health companies every day. In fact, a lot of them. And they feel well suited in their roles. And I believe that they are, because there's a different perspective. So I think that blend is important. When we talk about basic healthcare needs like contraception, it actually affects the couple. Even some, whether it's young couples, older couples, they're at different stages in their life. They may be trying to have a baby. They may be not wanting any more kids, and the impact that has on the overall family. So my team has always been blended. My right-hand person is still with me today. He's a male. So it's not, we probably have more women on the team, but I think it's just best person for the position, and just happen to be that there's some women that there's more women in the makeup, but it's exciting to get that perspective. And I often do that. We assemble the team, men and women. How do you see this issue? Does that resonate? Would that resonate with your partner? Does that resonate with you? And I think that's important when you're looking at a solution that kind of affects the entire family.
I think that's such a great point about why diverse teams are important, is really having those different perspectives. And I know for myself, having been on teams that were overwhelmingly made up of men, it can be hard to have the woman's perspective heard, right, in a group that's 99% men. And I love that you've built a team that is diverse and is pulling in different views and likely benefiting the company as a result. You've said in interviews previously that storytelling is such an important piece of running a company. Where did you first learn the art of storytelling within the business sphere?
My mom would probably say at the age of like 3 or 5 when I opened my mouth, but it's an innate thing for me. I really love telling the story. I haven't actually had the opportunity to do so as much, and I'm looking forward to this era of time for the company. But practice makes you better as well. So I know that that's part of the role that I'm in. You have to be able to explain and do it in a variety of different ways, depending on your audience, what you're working on, the impact, the kind of return it could be if it's an investor. And so, being comfortable doing that is really critical. I, of course, have the added layer of this is absolutely something I feel 100% behind because I have conceived it and I work on it every single day. And perseverance is really important in a role when you're fighting in women's health, because it isn't an area where there's been a lot of investment dollars. It's not a sweetheart out in the community, and you need the funding to be able to advance what we do. It takes a lot of funding. So, honing in on those skills and being able to do that for the various different stockholders is just something that comes over time. You get better at it over time, but it's an innate skill for me. But hopefully you think I'm good at it too, since I'm on your podcast. Your audience thinks it's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm learning so much. And I think it's such an important piece in general is storytelling and communicating one's mission. And that's certainly from a business perspective important for fundraising and sales and all of that, but also just in general. So I was excited to get your perspective on that. So I'm curious, you started this company 18 years ago. I feel like just from a surface level perspective, so much has changed in this space. But can you share, your perspective on what you think has changed kind of across the board with regards to companies focused on women's health and even where Femysys is positioned within that?
Actually, unfortunately, don't see a lot of progression in the areas that we're working in. When we look at like the front end of infertility at 9 million women that are infertile, unfortunately, with that number going up, our fertility rates are declining. They're declining in countries like Japan and Germany first, even China with a third child policy. So there are clear indicators of infertility issues in the market, and all of our investment dollars have gone to the most expensive end of care. It's all we hear about when we turn on the TV is IVF, somebody's IVF journey. There's 200,000 IVF cycles done a year. There's 9 million women struggling with infertility. So as much as we say advancements, unfortunately, what I've seen is advancements in the same bucket. We look at heavy bleeding issues. I don't know how many endometrial ablation companies there are, but there continues to be companies that work on those solutions when there are solutions already that have come forward, 7, 8, 9, a dozen. But those are important issues. So I see that work being done in those buckets, those patient segments. What I don't see is in the areas where there's a dearth. It continues to be dry. And so for a company like mine, that presents a significant opportunity, but at the end of the day, there's no options for women in those key critical areas. People get comfortable investing in what everyone else is investing in. It's the 5th company pursuing the same thing. It's comfortable, or the 12th It's comfortable. The first company pursuing something in a way that's entirely different is incredibly uncomfortable. And so that's kind of where we find ourselves. We purposely put ourselves in that uncomfortable bucket where people have to have the vision, where they have to see what we're doing. And there's not going to be a comparable. There's not going to be 10 other people doing the same thing. Though everybody can feel really good about it. When we're the only ones working in these areas, that's a battle in and of itself. Huge opportunity, very important for women, but that's what I see 20 years later. It's still the same. So
why do you think there has been such a focus on the IVF side of things? And maybe we can also root the audience in the contrast of an IVF solution versus something that Femysys might have from a costs perspective. Do you care to elaborate on that?
Sure. IVF, which is why so few women get there, is incredibly expensive. It's emotionally burdensome as well. The conception happens in a petri dish and then is entered into the uterine cavity. Where we are focused is how do we take the first step and deliver the sperm perhaps in a better way. If we know conception happens in the tube and we can put things in the tube, let's put the sperm in the tube where the egg happens to be. So women ovulate on one side or the other. Under ultrasound, ultrasound's so great. You can see where the mature follicle is. So it's very easy to detect where the sperm should go. We also know the tube is incredibly small in size, about 1 to 2 millimeters in the opening. So you're going from a big cavity to a small little opening. So sperm has to overcome that. And we see male infertility issues on the rise, less motility, less mobility. So all of those factors come into play. So that's, we wanted to go to the front end where women could come off the sidelines. We have an issue with fertility. This is well documented. Whether it pans out to projections, time will tell, but it's documented that in a decade or so, we won't have enough 18-year-olds working. We'll have more 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds in the country's history for the first time ever. If the projections continue the way they are, there's less babies being born. And so how do we, knowing that women aren't going to get to IVF because it's expensive, emotionally burdensome, most won't be able to get there. How do we address the front end with an alternative solution? And that's kind of the tactic that we thought was important to take.
I think it's so needed and it makes complete sense. And it is, I think, almost frustrating how little I feel like this fertility issue is being talked about and the decline, in births and in a lot of countries. And, I hope that we can raise awareness on that. Kind of in contrast to what I just said, there has been some chatter recently, some companies coming about that have been discussing the idea of artificial wombs. And I was wondering if you've seen any of the news or chatter around that, and if you had any perspectives, having worked in this space for 20 years.
That's a very dramatic approach, and I can see that for maybe a very small segment of the population. But if we're talking otherwise healthy folks that get married or same-sex couples that want to have a baby, that's a pretty dramatic thing to try to bring into the equation when there might be a simpler, approach. I always tend to want to lean towards as natural as possible. So when we deliver our sperm, to the tubes, we are helping sperm arrive to the location, but we're not changing the dynamics of that. We're not screening eggs. We're not doing any of those things that's required for an IVF, which is why it's so expensive and why it's so necessary in certain indications. But, the most natural way is to have natural fertilization occur and overcome the obstacles, as many as you can, to make that happen. So I think this artificial womb and some of these other things I've heard is just it's going to be very expensive. It's a very small, we're going in the other end again. It's even more expensive likely than what IVF brings, which means it's even less people that could benefit from it. I just think people need to, we are going to continue to focus on less cost, increase the odds. And likewise on our FemBlock product for permanent birth control, when we think about there's 13 million women that are categorized as no longer intending children and their surgery. How do we bring better technology, knowing the limitations that exist for the existing technologies that are out there right now that no one really wants to talk a lot about, because what are the options? So it's the same type of story. Let's try to bring something that's less is more, for elective basic health procedures.
Makes complete sense. And again, I commend you for focusing your company on this space of, lower cost delivery mechanisms that can have a real impact across the board and not just be for the select few who can afford these dramatic treatment options. So looking ahead for Femysys, what is your hope for your company, and what's your strategy as a leader over the next 5 to 10 years?
My hope in the not so distant future is to kind of clear the regulatory goalpost with these products. We've been lifting and doing the development for quite some time, particularly for FemBlock, and we want to clear and get out there and impact women. There are a lot of women that have come into trials. There really are heroes to come in and contribute to research. But we're working really hard to make this a reality. And so that would be my ultimate goal in the near term. As far as longer term, I think we have an opportunity to really be a major player in women's health. How can we house other products that are designed for the OB-GYN in their office? Can we be that company that can bring lots of different technologies forward and kind of change that outlook for gynecologists? When we improve things for them, we're improving things for women. And that's a greater goal. I think we will have an opportunity to do that. There, for instance, are really no sales force going and calling on the OB-GYN in the office. I mean, there's prenatal vitamins, there's just nothing. There really isn't. So we can change that, and then we can bring that focus there. The OB-GYN is such a critically important specialty for women and for the family. When we think of 51% of our population being women and women making their healthcare choices for their family, I mean, happy mom, healthy woman affects everyone. So we really, engaging that and being kind of a source for GYNs to learn new technologies, to have access to them, to be a funnel, to be able to bring additional products forward beyond what's been internally conceived would be a gift. I would love to be able to do that inside of the next decade. And I would love to be able to lead that effort and continue this passion and mission and surround myself with even more people that kind of share in the responsibility of doing this right for women and finding good technology that really will otherwise have a very difficult time making it out to the market. You have to have a blockbuster to kind of do that with. The small little products really have to rely on acquisitions to kind of fold into a greater entity. So my hope is we have that opportunity one day.
Makes sense. And how does the company communicate to clinicians? I mean, how do you get the word out about these products so that they have access to using them for their patients?
So we attend conferences when they used to be when there used to be conferences, but we've been attending conferences for a long time. We purposely have looked to thought leaders to help us make sure that we're designing and developing properly. So that's been really instrumental in all of the phases. But post that, for instance, with our FemView product, I mean, we are doing outreach even through social media, LinkedIn, Facebook. Patients are telling their stories on YouTube. And we're now in the next phase going to be looking at doing physician testimonials and patient testimonials. So people can hear directly from their colleagues, directly from fellow women, what their journeys have looked like and how this product like played a hand in it. So that's our next kind of piece. I took the company public for that reason. Actually, there are tailwinds around women's health. We have a story to be told, and now we have a way to tell it. I probably never would have met you otherwise, as an example. And so this is giving us the platform to get the word out and maybe amass support to help keep this going and get through these different critical milestones that we have ahead, and support the company, because we need that support in order to make it to the next step.
Love it. Can you talk about the process of taking the company public and a little, dive in a little bit more to that decision and how critical it's been to the mission?
So I had been preparing the company to go public for a few years. So you can tell the planner's coming out again, and knowing that if we could time it right or there was an opportunity, I wanted to kind of be at the ready. And fortunately, we did that because an opportunity presented itself. We were approached to consider this type of public offering or a public offering during that time period, and we were closer to being ready because we had been preparing. Had we not, I think it would have been very difficult, being a smaller company, managing multiple products and clinical trials. So the planning is really critical for anyone who's thinking about doing this. I also did it without a full-time CFO, which is unusual, but it is what it is. And again, being properly planning for it and properly prepared is essential. I do have a new CFO. He started on Monday, so that's a critical new hire for us, and we're thrilled to have him on board. And that's going to really help with all of the things that happen post an IPO. So it's one thing to get it there, and then it's the next thing to maintain and be a healthy public company, which we intend to be every step of the way. So it was a grueling process. I will not tell your viewers otherwise. There have been very few female founders that have done it. So I find myself in a very elite small group, and I'm very proud of that. But it's definitely not for the faint of heart. Be prepared. And, I'm now looking at the market, the macro issues of the market, and it's causes a lot of heartburn and a lot of it's just really hard to look at the market. But I also look at it as an opportunity that we are still the same company with the same mission, with the same milestones ahead of us when we went public and today. So we just we put our heads down and get the job done.
Certainly. Yeah, it's been a kind of a trying time, I think, as far as the market in general and also biotech and pharma in particular recently. And I think there's been a push for companies to go public that might not have been ready, and also, just kind of suffering across the board in some cases. I commend you for taking the time, and you've really built something that already had incredible value as far as products and where you guys are positioned within this med tech space. So it hopefully you're somewhat immune to some of the heartache there. I don't know if that's a true perspective or not.
Well, at least I've heeded a lot of advice from public CEOs to, not look at the ticker symbol every minute of the day and, stay focused on the business. And that does take a little bit to get used to doing. And your stockholders, they back you, they come in and they have, you're responsible for all of it. And it does get quite difficult. But at the end of the day, we have a job to get done, and that's what we intend to do.
Absolutely. I want to get back to you as a leader and all of your learnings over the years. Can you share advice for other women founders out there, and any kind of key takeaways that you've had over the last 20 years of building this company?
I think it boils down to perseverance. I mean, just keep going. and, be fluid, because sometimes things happen that are completely out of your control, like a pandemic, which happened a week after we started our trial. Those are things you cannot control, and, manage your dollars, because at the end of the day, that's who survives, is the company that can pivot and manage your budget properly and extend your runway when you need to. It's hard in women's health because there hasn't really been glowing comparables that investors are going to look towards. We need to have some wins. So women founders that are running women's companies, like we need to keep pushing. And when somebody wins, the whole sector wins. And then more people will come. I think every investor I've ever talked to, which have been majority men, have said, well, obviously women have these needs, and obviously women's health is important. But then you have to bridge that from it's obvious to I'm going to step up and I'm going to back this and I'm going to put my money forward. And that's the gap that we have to, address. But
I think that's a great point. A more eloquent way of saying talk is cheap. Let's execute on these needs together. And I'm very hopeful for the space. I think, while I agree with your point that a lot of companies follow each other as far as what they're working on and what their focus might be, it is, I think, a positive signal that we've seen so many new founder-led companies and so many new women's health companies, and maybe where government research and funding has been lacking, we can make improvements on the private sector side. So I'm eager to see how things evolve. To that end, are there any other projects, teams, or folks in this space that you admire or you think are doing right by the women's health space?
I mean, I so admire any woman that's in my seat as well, no matter what product they're working on, particularly if they're working in women's health. And there's just a small number of us. We all know who each other is. I've sat on panels with many of these women. They're all making a difference. We need to move the needle. There's more of a presence of women on boards now too, which is going to add an element of that perspective that we're hoping to garner as we look to these issues. So, I mean, they're walking the walk. Just we have similar issues, we have similar struggles, we have similar opportunities. So I would say I admire every single one of them, and I'm grateful to be in that elite group of women that there's so few of us that are doing it. That it takes such effort and vision and stay the course, because we could definitely jump and do other things that might not have these added pieces. But women-led companies, it's important when you're looking at women's health issues.
Mm-hmm. How do you think we best onboard more women founders? Are there particular resources that you think can help with that?
I mean, every female CEO that I've talked to has talked about the importance of mentorship. We see very talented women. I see it in my own organization that have that possibility. It's a lot of work and it takes a lot of sacrifice to do what we do, but cultivating that, mentoring, taking time to do so. We're all so busy juggling so many things, as any CEO, male or woman, is doing, particularly if they're running a public company. So it's just, finding that to be a priority. Mm-hmm. And so every single one of us, it's the common theme is to talk about mentoring and being, involved and being able to connect and being available. People need to, want to reach out. I've yet to hear a female CEO think that they wouldn't carve out some time to help someone who's trying to pursue this similar journey. So likewise, myself, I would be happy to help someone.
Amazing. And for those who are listening who might want to chat with you as far as your experience in mentorship, where is the best place for them to find you?
I mean, they can find me on LinkedIn. That seems to be the best place. And certainly through our website, there's various different contacts. We're pretty easy to reach in this, especially being public. So it's all out there. If they really want to reach me, there's no problem in doing so. And, you know, it's important for us to support other women, especially women that are evolving in their careers. They're
Absolutely.
the future. Yep.
Awesome. Well, Kathy, I just want to thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insights and teaching us about Femasys's mission and all of your achievements in this space as an inventor and as a leader. I think it's incredible the headway you're making as far as offering solutions to women that are not at that dramatic end of the spectrum, the expensive, emotionally burdened end of the health spectrum, and really solving problems with solutions that can be more accessible to women. So thank you so much for your work and for taking the time today.
Thank you for the kind words, Jocelyn, and it was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you to all your listeners.
We'll make sure to drop Kathy's LinkedIn and the link to Femasys as well, if any folks are interested in learning more about this awesome company. So yes, once again, Kathy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That wraps up my interview with Kathy Lee-Sepsick. Kathy, thanks so much for taking the time today. And to our listeners, thank you so much for supporting and listening to Lady Scientist podcast. If you enjoyed the topic of women's health, I recommend you check out the interview I did with Allison Paquette. She's a researcher from the University of Washington, and we chat all about this topic as well. Thank you again for listening and supporting our show.